Kalorama, a recorded books hybrid imprint, presents The Globalization Myth, Why Regions Matter, by Shannon K. O'Neill. Read by Suzie Althens. The Council on Foreign Relations. The Council on Foreign Relations, CFR, is an independent, nonpartisan membership organization, think tank, and publisher dedicated to being a resource for its members, government officials, business executives, journalists, educators and students, civic and religious leaders, and other interested citizens, in order to help them better understand the world and the foreign policy choices facing the United States and other countries. Founded in 1921, CFR carries out its mission by maintaining a diverse membership, with special programs to promote interest and develop expertise in the next generation of foreign policy leaders, convening meetings at its headquarters in New York and in Washington, D.C., and other cities where senior government officials, members of Congress, global leaders, and prominent thinkers come together with CFR members to discuss and debate major international issues, supporting a studies program that fosters independent research, enabling CFR scholars to produce articles, reports, and books, and hold roundtables that analyze foreign policy issues and make concrete policy recommendations, publishing Foreign Affairs, the preeminent journal on international affairs and U.S. foreign policy, sponsoring independent task forces that produce reports with both findings and policy prescriptions on the most important foreign policy topics, and providing up-to-date information and analysis about world events and American foreign policy on its website, www.cfr.org. The Council on Foreign Relations takes no institutional position on policy issues and has no affiliation with the U.S. government. All statements of fact and expressions of opinion contained in its publications are the sole responsibility of the author or authors. Introduction. The Untold Story of Regionalization Amid Globalization. Akron, Ohio, made its name in tires. The city's rubber industry began by fitting out bicycles in the 1890s and soon followed Henry Ford into cars. During the two world wars, Akron's rubber companies scaled up to meet the military's demands, churning out tires, shoes, tubing, guns, blimps, and planes. They continued to flourish in the peace as Eisenhower's interstate highway system spurred a shift from rails to roads and baby boomers earned their name, the newly minted parents buying their first family cars. By the middle of the century, 5 companies in the rubber capital of the world were churning out nearly 60% of the globe's tires. Money flowed. Goodyear founder F.A. Seiberling held forth from a 65-room Tudor manor on the well-heeled west side of town. Over a dozen golf courses and country clubs sprang up to fill the leisure time and social calendars of the upper crust. Firestone built PGA tournament-level links as an employee perk. The thick society pages of the Akron Beacon Journal, the initial paper of the Knight Ridder News Empire, chronicled the dresses and seating charts at luncheons, cocktail parties, and the annual debutante cotillion held in Goodyear Hall. Life for the less Tony set was looking up too. Tire making was dirty but well paid. More than one home in the new East Side neighborhood of Goodyear Heights emulated their benefactor's Tudor style in miniature, company buses shepherding homeowners to and from their factory shifts. Eastern European migrants clustered in Firestone Park on the south side of the city. Weekends were filled with Industrial League games, Goodyear's Wingfoots facing off against Firestone's non-skids in a hometown rivalry, or taking on Peoria's Caterpillars, Milwaukee's Harnischvagers, or Denver's Chevys on the court and field. Akron's prosperity drew laborers from hundreds of miles away. Sunday nights, Route 21 would fill with West Virginia licenses headed for early Monday shifts. Fridays, the pickups would head back toward Wheeling. This wasn't the Akron I knew. In 1982, news photographers and Time reporters watched as Richard Mayo, a General Tire worker, pulled the last tire off an Akron factory line, ending nearly a century of local industrial history. As the smokestacks cooled, the bars and diners across South Main Street from the factory gates also went dark. During the 1980s, 4 of Akron's Big 5 tire companies would be sold off to foreign competitors. Tens of thousands of jobs, and even more people, disappeared from Akron. A once thriving city became a defining example of late-century Rust Belt decay. What had happened? It is easy to peg Akron as a victim of globalization, a once proud American industry and prosperous city brought to its knees by outsourcing and offshoring. Yet this isn't the whole story. Part of it was new radial technology from abroad that let French and Japanese tires outperform and outlast their American counterparts. Volatile labor relations pushed tire factories south, beyond the reach of the combative United Rubber Workers Union. But a big part of Akron's hard luck was the nature of the international competition it faced. The city's struggles reflect less the vagaries of globalization than the costly consequences of the United States' limited regionalization. By the late 1970s, Japanese tire and car production spanned East Asia. French and German makers had embraced Europe's economic community. With NAFTA negotiations still a decade away, Akron's companies had no partners to turn to in the face of burgeoning Asian and European manufacturing supply chains. This gave companies such as Michelin and Bridgestone an upper hand over their U.S. rivals. Left to go it alone, U.S. tire companies and their hometown went nowhere. Globalization. You love it. You hate it. You embrace it. You blame it. But it isn't the only, or even the real, story of the global economy over the past 4 decades. Yes, the world has internationalized, but it hasn't really globalized. It has regionalized. This distinction helps explain who has gotten ahead and who has been left behind. Those who engaged with their neighbors gained a competitive edge. It also provides a path forward for what the United States, and other countries for that matter, should do to help their citizens and communities thrive economically. Isolation and autarky aren't the answers, nor is unfettered globalization. The Goldilocks middle of regionalization propelled a number of nations forward over the past 40 years. And even in the wake of technological, geopolitical, and demographic shifts, geography still counts for a lot. Embracing and deepening regional ties is a way to succeed in an internationally connected and competitive world. Regionalization surpasses globalization. The overlooked reality of regionalization, as opposed to globalization, plays out in many areas. Tourists may travel from country to country, but they hop continents far less often. Students who venture abroad more often attend classes nearer than farther away. Trade officials, defense ministers, and secretaries of state tend to turn to counterparts in their geographic neighborhood first and foremost when negotiating agreements. So too do cross-border news readers, video watchers, and internet surfers. The regionalization of international ties is most pronounced in economics and markets. The story of economic globalization has been told and retold in books, speeches, articles, and news clips. Yet this conventional narrative largely misses the geographic limits of the majority of international commerce. When companies, workers, money, patents, goods, and services head abroad, they don't go just anywhere. More often than not, they stick close to home. What's happening to the global economy is better termed regionalization than globalization. The global in global supply chains, in particular, is a bit of a misnomer. Sure, some manufacturing processes do span the globe. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner, for instance. It brings together wings from Japan, engines from the United States or the United Kingdom, UK, flaps from Canada or Australia, horizontal stabilizers from Italy, landing gear from France. over 40 suppliers in all, and triple that number of sites worldwide. Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine, invented by Turkish immigrants living in Germany, begins with DNA spinning in U.S. steel vats insulated by Mexican liners. The mRNA joins Canadian-crafted lipids chilled in Chinese ultra-cold freezers monitored by Icelandic thermometers. Indian or Mexican glass vials, sealed by Chinese packaging, carry the life-saving serum to tens of millions of arms. But usually, when manufacturing goes abroad, it doesn't spread so far or so thin. Companies find the parts they need nearby. Suppliers sell to foreign customers close to home. The world has become more international, but not nearly as global as the news would have you think. Since the great manufacturing dispersion began some 40 years ago, commerce between neighbors and within regions has far exceeded that across continents. The power of proximity holds particularly true for the intermediate goods that are stamped, welded, sewn, or inserted to make final products. For every airplane part coming from the other side of the world, dozens of literal nuts and bolts come from next door. The manufacturing of cars, trucks, and SUVs exemplifies this trend. Take the Ford Edge. Its seats start life in Tennessee, where locally made foam cushions are covered with fabric from South Carolina and embellishments from Ciudad Juarez. The seats are attached to rails, molded in Matamoros, and shipped to Ontario to be fitted to metal frames. The Edge's braking system, battery, engine, and transmission all make their way to the final assembly line along similarly convoluted but almost entirely North American paths. On the other side of the Pacific, the Chinese carmaker Great Wall Motors brings together transmissions, chassis, and bumpers from Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan to create its best-selling Haval H6 SUV. In Europe, at Audi's main plant on the Danube, the German company pulls in Swedish power steering, Italian water pumps, Czech wheels, and French circuits to make its sporty two-door A5. Vehicles aren't the only industry to regionalize. Lenovo ThinkPads start life in a Japanese research and development (R&D) center, where technicians add features and hone designs. When ready, they are handed off to logistics specialists in Malaysia, who cull materials and parts from a network of factories across Asia. Ceramic capacitors come from Japan, hard drives from Thailand, glass screens from China. South Korean technology powers the semiconductors and processors. These and dozens of other components are then handed over to Taiwanese managers for assembly in Guangzhou plants before heading out to distribution centers across the world. The aerospace industry also offers similar tales. At Airbus's Toulouse compound, home to more than 20,000 workers, executives spend their days orchestrating a pan-European dance of processes and parts to build the company's commercial planes, helicopters, and satellites. French engineers hold conference calls with colleagues in Spain and Germany to iron out flaws in their 3D models. A few offices over, managers keep tabs on Swiss assembly lines making wing skins and carbon fiber shells, on testing results from Bremen-designed and manufactured lift systems, and on the machining of keel beams and engine nose cowls in Nantes. Wings from northern Wales, fuselages from Hamburg, rudder spars, landing gear doors, and tailboxes from outside Madrid all take to the roads, rails, and skies bound for southern France. They sail down the Garonne River in specially equipped barges and wind their way through the small village streets of Coulommiers on midnight deliveries. Even here, at the heart of one of the most complex supply chains in existence, over half the parts come from Airbus's home region. This is true for more than just manufacturing supply chains. It pertains to economies as a whole. Contradicting Thomas Friedman's take, the world is not flat. Moving things is still expensive. Even with monster ships able to carry over 20,000 containers on each sea crossing, oceans away, still means time and money. And it's not just about the cash. The need for teamwork also encourages keeping it local. Zoom, Skype, Slack, and dozens of whiz-bang digital analytics and management tools can't erase the advantages of similar time zones, languages, and cultural cues, or of shorter plane rides for face-to-face meetings. Government incentives to stay regional, free trade agreements, visa waivers, cheap loans, and other enticements help too. So does peer pressure and industrial clustering. Once a few companies set up shop next door, suppliers follow, as do consultants, eager to pave the way for others. And regionalization has proven a way to keep at least some of the benefits of factories, offices, and jobs at home in the face of stiffening international economic competition. 3 regional hubs emerge. Regionalization is the economic story of our time, but not all regions are created equal. 3 big hubs in Asia, North America, and Europe dominate manufacturing. Asia's is the largest, churning out nearly half the world's goods. North America and Europe together supply another 40% of global products. The rest of the world, Latin America, Africa, the Indian subcontinent, Central Asia, Russia, the Middle East, are left to divvy up the remaining 10%. Not only do the 3 big hubs make the vast majority of the world's goods, but they do it largely independently of other regions. Over 2/3 of Europe's trade remains within the European Union, EU, as Europeans make things together and buy from each other. Asia's trade ties, too, have deepened in recent decades. Over half of Asia's international commerce remains within the continent. North America is the least intertwined. Under half of its trade takes place between Canada, Mexico, and the United States. Still, this trade is far more interdependent than that in the remaining regions of the world. Europe's integration began in the ruins of the post-war world, as former enemies learned to trust each other through trade. From Rome to Brussels, Maastricht to Amsterdam, Nice to Lisbon, a stream of eponymous treaties bound Europe's members, economies, companies, workers, and populations together. With each ratification, Europe's ties thickened, its integration deepened, and the number of countries in the club grew. The expanding latticework of institutions, agreements, regulations, and court decisions came to govern not just commerce, but also the daily lives of citizens in over 24 countries. Despite frequent squabbles and several full-blown crises, the nations strove to uphold a single European vision, choosing to cede power to regional supranational institutions to propel and promote integration. Asia's binding together involved fewer diplomats. Instead, CEOs backed by state bureaucrats led the charge. East Asia was the first to knit itself together. As Japan rebuilt after the war, its government-supported industries turned to factories in Taiwan, South Korea, Singapore, and Hong Kong to assemble cars, televisions, and footwear. A decade later, these Asian tigers were rich enough to repeat Japan's success for themselves, farming out their own production to neighboring Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, the Philippines, and the rest of Southeast Asia. In the late 1970s and early 1980s, China joined the assembly line as its neighbors began outsourcing labor-intensive work to the country's new special economic zones. It was the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, that spurred the rise of a production platform spanning North America. The United States, Canada, and Mexico had always traded with each other, but after the 1993 Free Trade Agreement, continental commerce quadrupled in size. A decade on, U.S. manufacturers were buying and selling more from Canadian and Mexican producers and consumers than from any others in the world, moving modules and components from factory to factory to make cars, planes, MRI machines, and flat-screen TVs. North America's connections weakened as the 21st century progressed, thanks to China's rise and the hardening of borders after 9/11. But even today, well over $1 trillion worth of trade crosses North American borders each year, sustaining thousands of businesses and millions of workers. These three regional manufacturing hubs compete for companies, brands, and consumers. Asia's vast workforce and its ability to quickly scale production has given it the edge in electronics. Companies like Foxconn, LG, and Lenovo churn out millions of smartphones, LED lights, and 9 out of every 10 computers. The EU's more formal integration created built-in markets that enabled companies such as Novartis to succeed in pharmaceuticals and Bosch in car parts. In North America, NAFTA's market-based approach honed productivity, advancing world-class companies like Honeywell, United Technologies, and Medtronic in aerospace and medical equipment. The United States' reluctant internationalization and regionalization. Despite the rise of a North American manufacturing platform, the United States has been slower than others to enter the global trading fray. It remains one of the more closed economies in the world, with trade as a portion of gross domestic product, GDP, less than half the world's average. The United States continues to be less integrated with its neighbors than its European or Asian commercial rivals, as more of its trade still goes to countries outside its region than within it. A large domestic market and substantial wealth have made it easy enough for most companies and their workers to focus only on consumers at home. A significant portion of the economy is in services, which have been much slower to cross borders. And while overall U.S. tariffs and other barriers are quite low, in some areas, ships, apparel, shoes, chemicals, and many agricultural products, protection has effectively kept most others out. Still, the United States hasn't avoided international integration entirely. U.S. trade has more than doubled over the past 2 decades. Much of the growth in U.S. exports has been in intermediary parts sent off to be combined into computers, cars, planes, and thousands of other products. U.S.-made heavy machinery, tools, trucks, and tractors, known as capital goods because they're used to produce other products, are used by farms and factories all around the world. Add in raw materials, iron ore, cotton, petroleum, copper, and close to 2/3 of all the things the United States sends abroad go into making something else. This round of regionalization and globalization has brought real, if generalized, economic gains to the United States. Businesses, workers, and families have all benefited from more and cheaper goods. The sheer number of items and the fall in prices together enable today's middle class to own far more gadgets than its predecessors did. Nostalgia blurs the vision. During the supposed middle-class golden age of the 1950s, 1 in 5 households didn't own a car, and fewer than 1 in 10 had a television. Today, the average home has 2 cars, 3 televisions, and a proliferation of other screens. 9 out of 10 have a computer. 3 out of 4 Americans a smartphone. A middle-class lifestyle includes former luxuries turned basics: air conditioning, washing machines, and dishwashers. Abundance has come in large part from technological breakthroughs, but mass ownership is also the result of supply chains that draw on many different factories and countries to make goods cheaper for all. According to a study by the Peterson Institute, a think tank for economics, the average U.S. household gains the equivalent of $10,000 in real disposable income from trade every year. Working-class families benefit the most, as cheap manufacturing turns extravagances into staples. Today's TVs are bigger, their screens crisper, and their prices just a quarter what they were a decade ago. Toys, kitchen supplies, and sneakers all cost a fraction of their former price tags, thanks largely to trade. Trade doesn't just help consumers. Whatever the conventional wisdom says, the reality is that when U.S. companies make goods abroad, they create jobs at home. One study of U.S. multinationals found that for every job companies filled abroad, nearly 2 new jobs opened up in the United States. Another study, by 2 Harvard professors and a colleague at the University of Michigan, found that when U.S. companies hire people abroad, U.S. jobs, wages, and investment all increase too. Foreign companies that set up shop in the United States also boost local prosperity. As well as hiring workers, they buy 80% of their parts from local suppliers, and they pay their employees nearly a third more than do companies that aren't tied into global markets. Why does creating jobs abroad also create them at home? The answer is straightforward. Cheaper manufacturing means more sales, and more sales means more workers are needed to run operations in the United States. Outsourcing allows companies to find cheaper parts and cheaper manufacturing processes. It can also mean higher quality, as companies exploit specialized materials or manufacturing skills not available at home. Operations abroad open up new markets, giving companies the chance to sell to a whole new group of consumers. When brands can offer the same or higher quality products at lower prices to more people, they sell more. And when they sell more, they need more designers, engineers, managers, marketers, and a whole host of other U.S.-based suppliers. Multinational sales, whether in 1 or a dozen countries, link U.S. offices and operations to the global economy. And the resulting jobs are the good jobs politicians often talk about, well-paid and reliable. Of course, not all Americans enjoy the fruits of globalization. Interconnectedness has left many U.S. companies, workers, and communities vulnerable to shifts in international manufacturing. Disruptions in production elsewhere, whether from natural disasters, political spats, economic downturns, or even pandemics, can delay or cancel the contracts that keep U.S. factory lines running, sales reps on the road, and store shelves stocked. And the deepening of regionalization elsewhere has cut out U.S. suppliers as they turn to sources and factories closer by. Many of the new positions that are created aren't in the same place or the same kind of jobs that have disappeared. Those who are accustomed to working a factory line aren't likely to easily transition to designing, coding, or marketing. And over the past 3 decades, trade is one of many factors that has helped make jobs in the United States more transient. The average American worker will hold nearly 12 different positions over their lifetime. The median time in each job is less than 5 years. And while job churn has risen, wages for the middle and working classes have not. This stagnation has many causes that play a bigger role than trade. Automation and technological changes, the decline of unions, the erosion of the minimum wage by inflation, fading entrepreneurship, and for many, not enough or the wrong kind of education. The COVID-19 pandemic has further disrupted the situation, especially for lower-skilled workers, as millions lost jobs during lockdowns. While less influential or important, these pressures also reflect the rise of international supply chains, as many manufacturing steps are now done more cheaply elsewhere. Most Americans understand these complexities. Polls show nearly 3/4 of Americans believe trade benefits the United States as a whole. A majority believe trade, broadly speaking, creates jobs, even as they recognize the costs that some Americans do often pay. Many local politicians understand the advantages of trade. The governors of 40 states and mayors of dozens of cities have opened some 200 outposts abroad to attract foreign investment in the United States. From Beijing to Mexico City, entrepreneurial politicians showcase their facilities, workers, and locales to far-off companies and help their local businesses woo global consumers. The United States national politicians are, sadly, less nuanced. On the left and the right, leaders denounce trade, blaming it for everything from lost jobs and devastated communities to rising inequality and government deficits. In the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, They have added national security concerns, pointing to stretched-out global supply chains to explain the scarcity of medical equipment and medicines that...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?